Welcome back, my curious little shadows. This is Whispers in the Dark, and I've crept back into your dreams to deliver another tale. A story older than any grave you've passed without noticing. Tonight we whisper of a relic, ancient, cursed, alive. It doesn't sleep, it remembers. And worst of all, it listens. Let's begin. Episode 8, The Relic. Damien Rowe had been painting for 15 years. 15 years of rejection letters, empty galleries, and canvases that no one wanted to buy. He'd graduated top of his class from art school, his professors calling him promising and gifted. But promising doesn't pay rent, and gifted doesn't fill an empty stomach. His tiny studio apartment was a graveyard of failed dreams, canvases stacked against every wall, each one a reminder of his mediocrity. His latest painting, a landscape he'd worked on for 3 months, had been rejected by the 13th gallery that week. The curator barely glanced at it before saying, "It's technically proficient, but it lacks soul." Soul. Damien had been hearing that word for years. His work had no soul, no life, no spark. He was a perfect copyist with nothing original to say. That's when desperation led him to Thornfield's Antiques, a cramped little shop on the edge of town where forgotten things went to die. The shop smelled of dust and decay, grandfather clocks that no longer ticked, mirrors that reflected shadows from decades past. And there, in a glass case between a broken compass and a music box with a missing dancer, was the pendant. It was unlike anything Damien had ever seen. Ancient silver, tarnished black with age, surrounding an obsidian core that seemed to absorb light itself. No chain, no markings, just smooth, dark metal that seemed to pulse. The moment Damien picked it up, warmth spread through his palm. The pendant grew warm, then hot, pulsing like a living thing. And then it spoke, not with words, with whispers that bloomed inside his mind like dark flowers. "What do you desire most?" it asked without asking. Damien's throat went dry. I want to be famous. I want my paintings to be legendary. I want people to remember my work forever." The pendant pulsed once, slow and satisfied. Granted. The old shopkeeper didn't even look up when Damien paid, just smiled with yellowed teeth and waved him away with a gnarled hand, as if he'd been expecting this transaction for years. That night, Damien's hands moved before his mind could catch up. He painted with a fury he'd never known. Violent strokes, impossible colors, images that seemed to crawl off the canvas. The pendant sat on his easel, pulsing gently, guiding every brushstroke. When dawn broke, Damien stared at what he'd created. It was magnificent, terrifying, alive. The painting sold within hours, and then another, and another. Gallery owners who had ignored him for years suddenly couldn't get enough. Critics called his work transcendent and otherworldly. Collectors fought bidding wars over his paintings, paying prices that made Damien dizzy. But success came with a price. The pendant wouldn't let him paint anything else. When he tried to create something from his own imagination, his hands would shake, his vision would blur, and the whispers would grow angry. "Paint what I show you," it demanded. "Paint what I need." Damien stopped sleeping. The pendant wouldn't let him. Every time he closed his eyes, visions flooded his mind. Dark landscapes, twisted figures, scenes of things that should not be. His hands cramped from holding brushes 18 hours a day. His eyes burned from staring at canvases. His stomach gnawed at itself. But eating meant time away from painting, and the pendant would not allow that. He locked his apartment door and covered the windows. The outside world ceased to exist. There was only paint, canvas, and the constant hypnotic pulse of the pendant. Friends called. He didn't answer. His landlord knocked. He painted through the sound. The world moved on without him, but Damien didn't care. He was creating masterpieces. He was legendary. Months passed, or maybe years. Time had no meaning in Damien's dark little world. His hair grew long and wild. His clothes hung off his thinning frame. His fingernails were permanently stained with paint and other things. Because the pendant had begun asking for more than just his time and sanity. "One final painting," the pendant whispered one night, its pulse so strong it made Damien's teeth ache. "The grandest work you've ever created. Your masterpiece. Your legacy." Damien nodded eagerly. His hands shook with anticipation as he prepared the largest canvas he'd ever used. 6 feet tall, 8 feet wide, big enough to hold all his obsession, all his madness, all his soul. For 3 days straight he painted, colors that hurt to look at, shapes that made reality bend, images that seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. The pendant pulsed harder and harder, feeding him visions of impossible beauty and cosmic horror. On the 3rd night, as the painting neared completion, the pendant whispered its final request. "Your blood, Damien. The painting needs your essence, your life force. Give it willingly, and your work will truly be legendary." Without hesitation, Damien took his palette knife and drew it across his palm. Red droplets fell onto the canvas, spreading and swirling, becoming part of the painted landscape. The pendant's pulse became thunderous now, matching his racing heart. More. It demanded everything. Damien stood before his completed masterpiece as heat began radiating from the pendant. It glowed now, white-hot against his chest, where he'd hung it on a makeshift cord. His skin began to smoke, then blister, then burn. But he didn't scream, didn't run, didn't even flinch. He stood there in perfect silence, staring at his painting with eyes that reflected its impossible colors. His body turned to ash from the inside out, slowly, methodically, like paper feeding a flame. The pendant consumed him piece by piece, drawing his very essence into itself, adding his soul to its collection. When the burning stopped, there was nothing left of Damien Rowe, but a small pile of gray ash on the paint-splattered floor. The pendant sat atop the ashes, clean and cold and silver once again, as if it had never been used. The painting remained, hanging on the wall in all its terrible glory, waiting for someone to find it, waiting for someone to see its beauty and wonder who had created such a magnificent work, waiting for the next dreamer to wish they could paint like that. If you ever find yourself in an antique shop and something beautiful catches your eye, something that seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, do yourself a favor. Don't pick it up.